Evil Pixel.
It isn't uncommon for video game developers to conceptualize game pitches from comics. In fact, it's done pretty frequently. Now, back in the 90s, comics and TV shows were a huge source of video games ideas, more than it is today even, keeping in mind that internet wasn't as popular as it is today. Now, Robocop was one of the most popular movies in the late 80s and spawned several sequels, and likely in those situations, video games spawned from that, although not very good. The same exact thing could be said about The Terminator, which released in the mid-80s and spawned several sequels as well, even as recent as 2019, and of course that spawned video games as well. Now in 1992, Dark Horse Comics decided to merge both these universes and create a series based on both premises. Robocop Vs The Terminator was published in May of 1992. In the Robocop vs. Terminator series, Skynet sends two Terminator units back in time to the comic's present-time Detroit in order to protect Robocop from being destroyed by a human resistance soldier. As time progresses, Murphy, or Robocop, was made aware that the reason why he was being protected is because Skynet was involved in his creation. Realizing that the technology used to build him is the reason why humanity was on the brink of extinction, he then sides with the humans and goes against the machines. That's just a quick rundown of it, and the series actually isn't that bad. Now this did spawn a game for the Sega Genesis, Sega Game Gear, Super Nintendo, and Game Boy in 1993. However, we're going to talk about a certain platform that the game was planned for but never released. And so in today's video, we'll be discussing the unreleased Robocop vs. The Terminator for the NES. The retail version of Robocop vs. The Terminator was a side-scroller that wasn't necessarily bad. It just didn't really do anything specially good. It was just okay. It followed the comics pretty closely though, so no real complaints there. Again, it wasn't bad, just average. Now what was cool about it is the fact that the box of the SNES version of this game was a really cool hard case box unlike any other at the time. That alone made people want to buy the game, but I digress. Now as mentioned previously, Robocop vs. The Terminator was a multi-platform game, which was decent for the newer 16-bit consoles, but unfortunate for those getting left behind, such as the Nintendo. Remember, this was 1993, and the Super Nintendo was hitting its peak. Interestingly enough, Greg Tavares, the creator of the McKids for the NES, was put in charge of the NES port of this game. The NES version of this game made it all the way through its production. The only thing it lacked was the testing and very minor fixes. Unfortunately, as stated previously, it was at the peak of the 16-bit era and people were leaving behind their NESs. Due to the developers realizing this, the game was ultimately never released to the public. Now it wasn't missed either, and this is mainly due because no one knew this port of the game was even being made, as it was never advertised or spoken of. The only reason why few knew about it was because Greg Tavares spoke about it briefly in an interview with Digital Press. He stated, "It was a very bad game. The artist couldn't deal well with the limits of the NES, so it looked very bad, and the designer was a recently promoted playtester and he didn't really know what he was doing. So it seems the game was pretty much doomed from the start." According to the sources, a prototype of the game randomly appeared on a very specific NES fan site not long after Greg's interview. It showed up on the site TSR's NES Archive. Now this archive site is very old. The site was established in March of 1996 and is still up and running today. I'm not even sure if the admin is still around because the last blog post was in January of 2000. 21 years ago. But anyways, it was said that the game appeared on this site around 1998 for people to download. And I wouldn't really be surprised because the internet being new to people, I couldn't imagine that there were very many NES sites around to share files such as this one. Now as for the game itself, I have the same thing to say about it as I did for the other platforms. It's not great, just okay. But I would say that the animation looked pretty decent for the time. Robocop can shoot up and diagonal, and when he does, his torso moves along with his movement. And also the animations like climbing, jumping, and swinging look very good. Now that's not to say that the controls aren't clunky, because they are. If you've ever played Robocop 3 for the NES, this game feels about the same. Now once again, the game's story is based on the comic. Some of the enemies you fight are both humans and machines. One thing that I thought was really cool is the fact that the Terminators can't just be killed with bullets like in the movies. So you have to use the environment to destroy them, such as shooting them into a vat of acid. The levels in the game I thought were pretty cool as well. The variety changes from your standard factory to a destroyed post-apocalyptic ruined city. Robocop is also able to upgrade his weapons, and I know it's a minor thing, but I like how you can see the weapons flash fire as you shoot. A small but pretty cool addition. Now honestly, I feel like if the game was to be released prior to the Super Nintendo's arrival, or even before the 16-bit versions were released, it would have done pretty well. The graphics are decent, the gameplay is okay, the sound and music is all average. So overall, not that bad. There are certainly much worse games out there, but that's just my opinion. Now, no cart that I know of has ever surfaced of this game, so it's assumed that the ROM was sent to an admin of TSR's site. The site does state that the admin would still be responding to emails, so I did just that, but unfortunately I never heard back from him. Now there are carts of this game for sale on auction sites like eBay. Just know that these are not authentic and just repro carts. Interestingly enough, the game's Genesis version was awarded the bloodiest game of 1993 by EGM magazine. Now for fans of the 8-bit side-scrollers, I'd say give it a shot. As I mentioned earlier, there are definitely much worse games out there. Now I'll have a link of all the sources that I sought out in the description below if anyone's curious and wants an interesting read. But unfortunately, that is all we know of Robocop vs. The Terminator for the NES. Thank you guys for watching. Check out some of our other videos if you like. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter, check out our other social media, and if you want to help us out, check a look at our Patreon. And I'll catch you all next time.